Dante Alighieri is widely remembered as the ultimate voice of Catholic orthodoxy. For centuries, readers have viewed him as the definitive architect of the Christian afterlife, meticulously mapping out every tier of hell, purgatory, and heaven to align with church doctrine. But Dante never actually called his masterpiece the Divine Comedy. He just called it comedy. The word divine was added by a Venetian publisher in 1555, long after his death, branding the poem as a religious work rather than a political one. In the years immediately following his death, the Catholic Church saw Dante as a threat. A papal cardinal even ordered copies of Dante's chief book of political philosophy, Monarchy, to be burned in the public square. By 1554, the Vatican officially placed Monarchy on the Index of Prohibited Books. They were using their censorship apparatus to suppress the poet's arguments for a secular government that operated independently of the Pope. That prohibition remained until the late 19th century. Pope Leo XIII rehabilitated Dante's reputation, casting him as the poetic spokesperson for St. Thomas Aquinas. The Church effectively turned a former dissident into cultural capital for neo-scholasticism. Beneath the heavy use of Christian vocabulary, Dante's guiding orientation was that of a radical secularist. His blueprint for an ideal society relied on the Islamic philosophy of religion. Approaching the comedy as a simple theological manual overlooks a writer who was deeply engaged with the rationalism of Baghdad and Cordoba. Dante describes human existence with two equal ultimate goals: earthly happiness achieved through reason, and heavenly happiness achieved through faith. This secular focus came from Islamic rationalists like Al-Farabi and Averroes, providing a framework for a government focused on the common good. Averroes argued that human perfection is achieved through social life and moral virtue. In this view, it is necessary for citizens to be good, but not necessary for them to know the absolute truth of religious dogma. This Islamic framework recenters the comedy. While the Inferno's classification of sins is famous, purgatory, guided by the pagan poet Virgil, is where Dante demonstrates how to build a just society through practical action. Paradiso treats theoretical theology, knowledge of the Trinity and the Incarnation, as a surplus. It is a source of bliss for a few, but Dante implies it is not a prerequisite for achieving universal peace on earth. His primary obsession was the construction of a terrestrial paradise. He wanted a perfectly just society governed by human reason, a goal he believed was accessible to all people regardless of their faith. If earthly happiness is a secular pursuit, how does Dante judge the fate of those outside the church in the afterlife? The standard medieval Catholic baseline was exclusive. Salvation was limited to baptized Christians. This doctrine cast all other cultures, regardless of their virtue, into the dark. Dante's writing reflects the influence of Islamic mysticism, particularly the Sufi thinker Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi taught that divine mercy is all-encompassing, validating a multiplicity of differing religious paths. This aligns with the Quranic teaching that God ordained different laws for different nations to vie with one another in good works. It suggests that the right path is defined by ethical practice, not just identity. In Paradiso 19, Dante uses the figure of a divine eagle to ask a radical question. Why should a virtuous man born on the banks of the Indus River be damned simply because he never heard of Christ? He was using his poetry to dissolve the barriers the church used to divide humanity, moving towards a concept of universal salvation. Through the comedy, Dante challenged the idea that any single interpretive community could claim exclusive possession of God's grace. Dante designed the comedy as an ecumenical treatise. He used the framework of a spiritual journey to reconcile the world's conflicting religious identities with a single universal philosophy. He utilized allegory and irony to protect himself. By maintaining a literal Christian surface, he was able to safely circulate a deeply pluralistic political agenda that would have otherwise led to his execution. At the absolute mathematical center of the poem, the centermost verse of Purgatory, Dante placed the words, "Blessed are the peacemakers." This serves as a signal that terrestrial harmony is his one and only concern. This pluralistic reality was buried under centuries of rebranding, as the church transformed a critic of its temporal power into its most famous spokesperson. The Arabo-Islamic tradition reveals a Dante who didn't see faith as a barrier, but has one of many paths toward shared human excellence. By grounding his work in the ethics of Averroes and the universalism of the Quran, Dante emerged as a visionary. He crafted a blueprint for global peace that recognized the legitimacy of every culture, centuries before the modern world began to catch up.